Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. And welcome to episode 10 of the ESG Show. And today we are focusing on the business case for ESG. The proposition is simple enough. ESG is good business. The economist Milton Friedman once said that the social responsibility of a business is to increase profits. And many free markets advocates criticize ESG for being anti-profit. And they talk about ESG being at odds with the fiduciary duty of a business and its senior managers. But if today's proposition is right, ESG is consistent with the principles of capitalism. Talking of capitalism, critics call ESG woke capitalism. Are they right? And if they are, does it matter? So let's greet today's guests. Joining us today from the lovely city of Dublin is Aedin O'Leary.
Hi, Michael. Lovely to be here.
Hello, Aedin. How are you today?
Good, thanks.
Good. So Aedin O'Leary is an independent, non-executive director and sustainability consultant. She currently serves on the boards of Haven Green Investment Management. Aedin is chair of the ESG working group at the Irish Fund Directors Association, and in that capacity participates in the Climate Risk and Sustainability Forum established by the Central Bank of Ireland. She's co-founder of the Green Team Network, an initiative which devises collaborative solutions for the Irish funds industry to play its part in tackling climate change. She advises, speaks and trains on a range of ESG and sustainability topics across different forums and industry sectors. So Aedin, how do we go about training people in ESG?
Yeah, I get asked that quite a lot. And like ESG and sustainability is such a vast topic, and there's new acronyms and so on coming every day. So what I think the important factor when it comes to training is to distill down the information to digestible parts. So I always start with any group of people by making sure we all have the same understanding, at least in that point in time, about what we mean by ESG and sustainability, because they mean different things to different people. And I know we're going to talk a bit about that later. So I try and set the record straight with a few kind of fundamental definitions about ESG versus sustainability, where they overlap and where they're distinguished, I suppose, from each other. Then I try to kind of unpick the E, S and G factors. Do we understand what environmental factors are, social factors, governance factors? So at that point, it's kind of it's a very kind of a general background understanding. And then I acknowledge, I suppose, how did we come to the point where E, S and G are so important on business agendas? To kind of bring it into, well, like, why is it relevant? Why is it relevant for you? So at that point, as I say, it's fairly generic and general about ESG and sustainability. And then we try and get more down into the weeds. Well, what is ESG and sustainability going to mean in your particular organization? I would typically, I suppose, look at things like going through the UN Sustainable Development Goals, because a lot of companies would look to those for some guidance or part of the kind of compass when it comes to setting up their stall and setting out their statement and their vision around ESG and sustainability. So I would, so there's certain fundamental things I would bring into the initial training before we dig deep and look at the steps for where do you want to be as an organization in terms of sustainability, how are you going to get there, and what you need to put in place. But I mean, I could go on. There's a lot more to it than that. But they're the fundamentals for getting started. Is to background and make it relevant to your organisation.
Thank you very much, Aedin. That was very interesting. And our next guest today is Sue Bonney. Hello, Sue. How are you today?
Hello. I'm very good, thank you. Very
good. Good. So Sue is a non-executive director at the Forward Institute. She's the former head of ESG at KPMG and now works with individual companies as a sort of mystic Meg, helping them demystify and navigate the ESG fog. So, Sue, can you just explain to the non-British people here who Mystic Meg is?
Yeah, it was a bit of fun, really. But Mystic Meg was probably the most famous astrologer in the UK for a long time. And amongst other things, she used to appear on the TV lottery programme, and she used to cut through the swirling mist to predict who would win. For many companies at the moment, ESG is a bit of a swirling mist. It's over full of acronyms. It kind of manifests itself as this whole load of similar but different demands from different users, like your investors, like your customers, like your employees and stuff. And it can absorb huge amounts of time and huge amounts of resources, and it's easy to get lost in it. So what I help companies do is get to a coherent strategy, to chart a path to get them through, so that they're not overwhelmed by all these demands, and they're actually adding value to their business in the process.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Sue. And I'll talk to you again in a moment. And finally, but by no means least, on the show today, we have Emily Winkler. Hello, Emily.
Hi, Michael. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So Emily is an impact entrepreneur and sustainability expert dedicated to driving positive change through innovation and good business practices. As the founder and CEO of Valop, a SaaS marketplace for environmental and social solutions, she helps businesses, organizations, and governments develop ESG initiatives that align profit with purpose. So Emily, she's also the founder of Link, an impact lab that has created over a dozen ventures focusing on enhancing economic and social development across the Middle East and Africa. Her exceptional work has earned her multiple awards and global recognition as a visionary leader who harnesses the power of innovation and creativity to drive positive change and environmental change. Her dedication, expertise, and unwavering belief in the power of business to make a positive impact make her a true catalyst for change. So, Emily, is it really possible to align profit with purpose?
Absolutely. I love that we're still asking that question. 10 years ago, this question was asked, and we really wondered if it was possible. But today, there's overwhelming proof and results coming out from large corporations that aligning purpose and profit is not only good for the good causes of it, but it is super good for business. And today, I believe it's like asking a company, do you want to reduce costs? Do you want to increase efficiency? Do you want a double ROI, a return on investment and impact? If you say yes to all of those things, then this conversation will be great today on this show, because we can see the results of how you can achieve these things by shifting your business mindset to sustainability innovation and adopting that internally for positive growth.
Thank you very much for that, Emily. Well, with such amazing guests, how can this possibly be anything other than great? So I'm going to be a little bit naughty, and I'm just going to ask you a question, which is ESG woke capitalism?
Who goes first?
I don't mind. How about you? Do you want to kick off?
Yeah,
Emily?
sure. Yeah, okay. You know what? I can't vouch for everyone's agenda for why they're engaged or otherwise with ESG, but I personally don't believe it's woke capitalism, because I think it is capitalism, and related to capitalism, I think it's related to stakeholder capitalism. So we were previously in a world where all the focus was on providing a shareholder return. Now you have to provide other deliverables to all sorts of other stakeholders, so employees, customers, and so on. And they quite simply expect deliverables in relation to environment, social, and governance factors. So I don't think it's a woke agenda in the main. That's the short answer, Michael. But I want to give there's Generation Z and millennials will tell you that they won't work. All other things being equal, for organisations that don't have the right credentials in this space, for example.
Okay, thank you for that. Emily, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I see this debate across a lot of countries these days, particularly coming out of the US, very strong. I think it's a shame that there's even a debate regarding the genuine elements of ESG. I think that it's phenomenal that capitalism is turning itself into a value-based capitalism, where we can reap the benefits of the business world, but also use the business world for positive change and not only negative impact. So does that go into wokeness? I actually think that everyone has a different definition now for woke, and even that we're unclear of. But what I will say for sure is it shouldn't be bashed, and it shouldn't be put down, and it shouldn't be gotten stuck inside a political debate that could potentially prevent businesses from actually doing the positive change that they can do.
Okay, thank you. And Sue, anything to add?
I would just add, so if you think about it, E means the impact of the company on the environment, but it also means the impact of the environment on the company. S is its contributions to its communities, which presumably includes its markets and its suppliers. And G is how it conducts itself and you know, how compliant it is and how well managed. So genuinely done, if you add all that together, that should lead to a more resilient business as well as a more responsible business, like we've been talking about. And you know, what's not to like on that? I suppose what I would say is, to be fair, if it's not done properly and if it becomes grandstanding or greenwashing, then there is more to be critical of. And you know, let's be honest amongst us, there is a lot of that going on too, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So, you know, so resilient is about resilience. I understand the dictionary definition of woke is awake to social injustice anyway, which doesn't strike me as being too bad, but maybe that's a bit too controversial. Okay, now we turn to that part of the show when we have a look at the news items. And there was an article in ESG today. 60% of analysts say companies' ESG claims not backed up by action, or so a Fidelity survey says. Excuse me just a moment. The article says approximately 60% of analysts estimate that the ESG credentials promoted by the companies that they cover are not backed up by their actions, although companies are becoming more responsive on ESG issues as companies increasingly tie sustainability factors to remuneration and assign board-level oversight to ESG, according to a new survey by investment manager Fidelity International. So, Aedin, this is a classic greenwashing story, isn't it? What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think there's really two parts to this report. On the one hand, there's a suggestion, like in any kind of overstatement of your credentials in the green space, or making claims that you can't back up, is either actual greenwashing or unintentional greenwashing or implied, you know, perceived greenwashing. So yes, if you can't back up your claims, then that's not a good space to be in. The other part of the story of this article is about that there's signs and evidence there of huge, you know, quite significant efforts and improvements, things like ESG-based remuneration and that. So I think it's a two-part story, and it's based on, yeah, I mean, it does raise concerns. You're talking about investment analysts from a particular asset manager based on the companies that they cover and look at, and they're trying to make investment decisions about, feeling like they're not getting the information that matches the claim. So that's worrying on the one hand in terms of being able to make an informed decision. But I suppose there's other factors potentially at play too. I'm just being devil's advocate a bit here, that there may be companies that in fact are doing what they say on the tin, but aren't very good at articulating it back or providing the data and so on at this point in the journey back to the analysts. So it's that kind of mismatch there. But I do think it sounds like the report is, and I've only read the article about the report. I did very much intend to read the full report, but it's about, you know, finding that relating to their net zero that claims are being made, but the concerns that the bits in between needed to get to 2050 aren't there, or that information is there. So I think the suggestion that comes out of it is we need more kind of near-term targets for those analysts to feel more confident in the information they're getting.
All right.
But so I don't want to call it an out-and-out greenwashing story, but it's definitely deficient and concerning in terms of the information.
Thank you for that. Sue, anything to add?
Well, if you think about it from the company's point of view, the companies that are being invested in, it's hard. So a colleague of mine used to say, you can't put lipstick on a pig, which is to say, it has to be genuine. And it's really easy, genuinely really easy to say you're going to be carbon zero by 2030 or 2025 or whatever that is. But this isn't just about, switching the lights off and stuff. It's about fundamental business change across the whole supply chain. It's what your products are, it's how you source them, who you sell them to, all that stuff. And I think some CEOs are only now really getting live to that. Perhaps that is because their pay is tied to it. It was also in that story. So I think it's hard and it's fundamental, which people are getting to grips with. The other thing to recognise is it is no good just majoring on one aspect but ignoring the others. So do you remember a couple of years back, Brewdog was seen as amazing on the E because their beer was carbon negative. So you drank a beer and saved the planet, nice. But then a bunch of former employees came forward and said that their culture was toxic and they were treated like objects and it was awful as a place to work. So the S and Brewdog's reputation and the company value, plummeted overnight. So you've got to look at it holistically, I think.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. So then the next story is from ESG Professionals Network. The US and EU going in different directions on ESG. The article says we need to talk about ESG and how it's going to in completely opposite ways on both sides of the Atlantic. In the US, the polarization of ESG is making the acronym a no-no, even for its fans, while the EU's regulatory tsunami on ESG will give US multinationals no choice but to embrace and track ESG principles regardless of what executives call them. And also, on a similar vein, an article in the FT talks about the EU Parliament chief weighs into environmental law. The article says, the head of the European Parliament has warned that lawmakers should not force ambitious environmental laws on voters, weighing in on politically toxic debate over the EU's green agenda that has split the EU's largest political group. So she's saying that that lawmakers should not force ambitious environmental laws on voters. So what are your thoughts about that, Sue? EU and the UK moving further apart?
I think there is a risk of that. I think this term ESG is a problem because what it should be is a proxy for evaluating which companies are more likely to be resilient and well positioned to have a long-term future because they're thinking in a broader way about the range of stakeholders who contribute to that success and what their needs are. And then they're backing that up with actions and data. And that's not inconsistent with good long-term investment. But it's got caught up in politics. So in the US, it's become, synonymous with liberalism and some really tricky social issues which tend to divide along party lines. So, you've essentially got conservatives aligning behind old style capitalism. So the shareholders, that only the shareholders matter. And that does tend to take you to more of a sort of here and now and less long-term perspective because, caring about whether we've even got a viable planet or to live and trade in 50 years time isn't relevant for that immediate decision. And honestly, I think in Europe it's kind of the flip. So there's this totally worthy desire, genuinely totally worthy desire to align ESG to get investment behind some of the critical issues for the planet. But that's led to some overwhelming and hard to understand reporting requirements. That's the tsunami that you read in that story. And as we've seen from the other story, that can be political and problematic too, because if those measures seriously adversely impact on the livelihoods of a bunch of European voters, then they won't get the support across the bloc that they need. I think just one final thing is I think it is fair, having said all of that, I think it is fair that here in Europe, this agenda is becoming more embedded in business as usual. So I think it will be hard for US companies to completely absent themselves altogether, even if the term ESG falls away a bit, which I don't think anyone would particularly mourn.
Okay, Aedin, can you? We are getting quite a few questions through, so we've got a bit of a time challenge this morning. Aedin,
Sure.
could you give me your thoughts very, very quickly on that?
Yeah. I mean, you saw me nodding my head a lot with what Sue was saying there. I mean, it's hard to see, despite the polarization, a situation where we do a complete U-turn and say actually looking at environmental, social, and governance factors aren't a good thing. I mean, how could we ever get back to that stage? Society and all our stakeholders are telling us they're important. It's the term ESG and the framework. I suppose it's imperfect and it's a work in progress, and I don't think it's going to fall away, but it's this polarization and this political debate does not help in any shape or form.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll just quickly turn to some questions because we've already got some coming in already. Hello to everyone who sent in their greetings to us this morning. Jerry Daniel says, from Ice Investment, real business KPIs so far seem to be irrelevant to a lot of what ESG is emitting. It's a good concept, stolen by activists, mainly virtual signaling. Okay, I don't think we can have enough time to answer that one, but that's his comment anyway. And then Scott Sevright, who was on the show last week, he says, hello, everybody. Hello, Scott. And he's got a comment here. Oh, we've got a lot of comments. It's taken me a long time to scroll through them.
Is it the one about the S, the social?
Yes, I think that the S, ESG, may get in the way of focusing on the E, especially in the US. There's more focus on E in Africa and Asia. There's a lot of interest in G, but the A bit in the US is definitely a sticking point. I think the E bit in the US is definitely a sticking point. And he carries on to say, I suspect the word social was an odd choice. If I had a time machine, I'd call it people. So the term is understood differently in Europe and USA. That's an interesting observation. Do you think it should be called EPG?
Well, the people, when we discuss a bit later on about sustainability, I mean, there's a few ways of looking at, there's different definitions of sustainability, but one of them is about how organizations, to be sustainable, want to offer triple bottom line results, and that's called the 3 Ps. That's people, planet, and profit. So you want to deliver good results in terms of profit, in terms of people. So yes, that's society and planet, environment. So he's not wrong. It's just there's so many different ways out there to describe what we're working towards now. I did hear, just an aside, that when the term ESG was coined, that the decision was to put S in the middle because the fear was that if anything got dropped, it would be the first to get dropped.
Yeah, that's Paul Clements.
So it was important to keep it in from a justice and equality point of view.
That's Paul Clements Hunt who came up with the acronym.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Leanne Hickman, can you link the articles you're referring to? Yes, we'll do that on social media. And Scott, one more question from Scott. I think we need to focus back on the temperature records being smashed. Well, yeah, I was looking at that this morning. I believe that I'm right in saying that July has seen the 5, 6, 7 hottest days? Not July, I beg your pardon, June has seen the 7 hottest days ever recorded. Maybe that's something we need to talk more about. Anyway, we need to push on because time, as ever, is the enemy. We're just going to have very, very little time to cover this final story. And Emily, if you could just talk about this. Delta Airlines faces lawsuit over $1 billion carbon neutrality claim.
Yes, so I'll give it in brief, and also as I emphasize the story, I'll try to answer 2 of the questions that have come up so far to the audience. So Delta, like many other companies, are currently in the news for essentially what could be attempts of either greenwashing or offsetting by carbon credits. And I know that the ESG show has had a session on carbon credits that all the viewers could probably refer back to. But I think it raises a big question, especially as in my experience with working with corporations, and to respond to one of the questions here on what can a company do other than going and purchasing credits to offset their impact. We're seeing a rise in solutions and services that companies can undertake and adopt internally to be able to prevent these types of articles from hitting the press and these types of of truths, where a company like Delta, let's just face it, they're an airline. They're going to fly. And so you can change the flaps on your plane, you can reduce weight, you can do maybe 20 different innovative services to reduce the amount of fuel you use. And you'll see that even when you buy a ticket, it'll say, this plane puts out 12% less greenhouse gas emissions. But in the end, they're still an airline, and we can't expect them to actually be net zero in that way. So is offsetting it okay? We'll leave that to another discussion. However, there is the option, in my opinion, to also offer vertical growth. And so the real question is, in this article, I think Delta Airlines is responsible for X amount of greenhouse gas emissions a year. What can they do themselves to rebalance that, or to internally take initiatives to offset that before going and just paying a market to do so? I think that's a big question that comes up here. And as they're all global companies, Delta's obviously not the only one. We're not singling out Delta here. They're all global companies, and it's a global responsibility. I think that this impact has gone way beyond a specific country or a specific government. As Scott mentioned in his comment, that it's a government's job to deal with the SDGs. I think those days are long gone. I think it's everyone's job to deal with the SDGs. Companies are a huge part of the global economy, and ESG is a way for them to lift their hands up together with governments and deal with this problem. And Delta is now attempting to do that as well.
Thank you very much, Emily. Now that we come to that part of the show when I do one-on-one discussions. We are running low on time this morning, I'm afraid. So, Emily, Aedin, I'm going to have a chat with Aedin now. I'm going to have to ask you to talk super fast.
Okay, so and you speed me up anywhere you need to. Okay.
Right, let's set the scene. Sue and Emily are going to be talking in a moment. So let's set the scene. Act 1, Scene 1. Can you explain ESG versus sustainability?
Yeah. Okay. I've spent so long thinking about this in a way that we can all agree on, and I think looking at dictionary definitions or the UN definitions of being what is it to be sustainable? It's to be able to continue over time. It's to be able to last, to endure, and the UN definition then is about meeting the needs of today without compromising the needs of future generations. So it's about being able to last. And what organization doesn't want to be sustainable? So being sustainable or sustainability is the goal. That's your end goal. That's what you want as an organization. Then ESG is a framework or a methodology which looks at how you're doing or how you're heading towards sustainability on 3 different fronts, looking at what you're doing environmentally, socially, and in terms of governance. And as Sue mentioned earlier, it's not just how you as an organization are treating the planet or society or being a good governance citizen, but it's also what's happening in the planet to affect your business. And so it's outward in and inward out. But ESG is a framework. It is not, your goal is not to have ESG. Your goal is to be sustainable. And ESG is a framework or a methodology or set of tools which looks at the risks, at the opportunities, helps you identify areas to mitigate risks and available opportunities. It's a tool or an aid to get you there to sustainability.
Okay. Yes. All right, thank you. And how did we get here?
Oh, how did we get here? Well, it's just born out of a load of different concerns, really. Concerns for the planet, that we're not minding it well enough, that we've a burgeoning population still, that we're still emitting carbon. We see the hottest days in the year, all around, the hottest days ever all around us. So it's that waking up to climate change and global warming and understanding we need to do something about that. It's concerns over society, that we're not minding people well enough, whether it's in impoverished areas in our organizations, having prejudice and being fair to people, that fairness and just that lack of tolerance for it going forward by society. And then governance, we've been mired by corporate governance scandals in recent years, and a culture of just not being able to tolerate this as consumers, as regulators has emerged. So it's 3 sets of concerns that have brought us to a place where E, S and G is very firmly on the agenda. And be open, transparent, and act with integrity. And that is where we've come from, and that's why it's on every agenda today.
Okay.
That's me now giving the speedy version.
One more very quick question for you. Is it going to go the distance? It's so polarized these days. Are we going to be talking?
Yeah, well, I think we've touched on this a bit already. I can't see us doing a U-turn as a society or business as regulators and saying that ESG no longer matter. So I think it will go the distance, but it'll be lots of iterations and evolutions. And ESG is not without its shortcomings. We're learning all the time. And we're working towards getting the data and the report together, but it's a bit like cart before the horse. We recognise we have to insist on it being there. We don't have all the pieces together to evidence it all and to show what we're doing. But I see it as an imperative. It has to go that way. Right. It may end up with a different name yet.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we're being joined by Sue and Emily again. And we're going to say goodbye to Aedin for a few minutes, and we're going to say goodbye to me for a few minutes as well. But I do have one quick question for you, Sue. Leanne Hickman, we have yes, you just excuse me, the question has disappeared. I think, Leanne Hickman, can you please ask Sue which ESG framework will survive the merger of standards?
Well, I was going to do a big reveal at the end of the show that says a very exciting announcement that two global standards have been announced by the ISSB. So accounting standard or disclosure standards, which may or may not sound exciting, but it is, because it's the first step really towards global harmonization of how people report this stuff. The first one is on general sustainability, the impact, the risks and opportunities on your business of sustainability. The second one is more specifically on climate. And so to the specific question, what's been good, in my view, is that they've taken on some of the other reporting things and absorbed those things. So it's not yet another go at it. So, for example, TCFD, which people will be very familiar with, lots of people on the call will be familiar with, about reporting on climate, is absorbed into that. And I think the plan is that as much as possible, so will some of the others. What it won't take away is all the different frameworks, all the different analysts and stuff used. Those I fear will live to fight another day.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Now I'm going off piste for a few minutes as Emily and Sue are going to have a chat, preparing the way for our group discussion. Very short a time, so can you talk at 100 miles an hour? And I'll come back in a few minutes.
Thanks, Michael. So, well, Sue, for the audience, this is going to be an interesting couple of minutes because both you and I help companies through the ESG process, but from different ends. You're very much up there in the stakeholder strategic decision mode of how will a company deal with this at all levels. And I come in more on the operations and implementation side of adopting these new innovative, sustainable solutions for these companies. So we could go on for hours and talk about the challenges.
Risky leaving us alone, I think.
I know, right? So, I'll go straight to the bluntness of it all. In every element of ESG performance or measurement, there's a carrot and a stick aspect of this. It's very difficult for companies, and especially because most of it is about regulation, we hear a lot about the stick. And I'm just wondering if you could maybe help, from your expertise, show where can you really find the carrot in all of the beating through the sticks?
Yeah. And I won't go through the sticks. We've kind of seen it. It's the reporting, it's the questionnaires, it's the people, the shareholders putting pressure on shareholder votes and all that sort of stuff. And, you kind of understand it, but it's hard, and the regulators and all that sort of thing. But I think there are carrots there. One is kind of turning adversity into advantage, if you like, because one of the things companies are having to do to respond to all these demands is come up with data, and it's data that's often non-financial, and it's buried across the business. So whereas companies pretty much know how to handle their financial data, they press a button and their financial statements pop out at the other end, more or less. This is different. This is kind of embedded in production processes, in HR, in the legal department and stuff. So it's hard to find, it's hard to manage and analyze, and it's hard to understand. But having to respond to these demands actually gives you a richness of data to really get a better handle on your business decisions, whether that's, what your energy consumption is, how much renewables you're using, but even less obvious things like you think you're a fair and diverse employer, but your gender pay gap might say something different. And so it might help you really genuinely, I think, get to make some better business decisions.
So these data-driven decisions that these companies can now make, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, this was all a company wanted, was data to be able to help them make decisions.
Yeah.
And so now we have all of this data across a lot of the operational and, like you said, every silo, every element of the company. And so how do you actually get to the greener side of ESG, not greenwashing, but really kind of to say we've gone the distance, we've implemented, because this all isn't only about measuring, right? Let's all face it, and we should know that this isn't about measuring and reporting. This is about actually improving those numbers year on year. And so how do we get through the improvement process to see how well we can actually succeed and grow our companies by these data-driven decisions?
So I think so. I've got 2 points on that, but just that point on the data is the output of what you do. I think it's really important to keep saying that these are outcomes and reporting. It's not the business itself. So I think it's a really good point to just emphasise. But 2 points on that. One is I think it's really important to see that this isn't just about the CSR department or the sustainability department or the head of sustainability. This is about the whole business. You've got to engage the whole company. It's everyone's responsibility, everyone's opportunity, if you like. And I think there probably is a need in lots of upfront education to help people get that, to help them understand, why it's part of theirs, win their hearts and minds, if you like. And, whether that's them building it into their goals, their performance. We've seen CEOs having it linked to their pay and stuff. So I think it has to be an all business effort to get the opportunities, to realize the opportunities. And then the second piece is, as you say, people are kind of hungry for data and then they get swamped with it and they wonder how to deal with it because it's overwhelming in itself. So I think technology is really key here. Having tracked it down, you've got to store it effectively. You've got to find tools to analyze it, and you've got to find, this is critical, a way to keep it live, to keep it updated, because it's not just a one-off exercise. This is living and breathing your business. And there are some really cool tools, some, I know some cool emerging tools which help you really do that and maybe even wire it into your system so that it's a living, breathing thing that you can use for your reporting and stuff. Yes, but again, you can use for your business decisions.
Amazing. Thanks, Sue. And before we turn it back over to Michael, I'll just add that it's really, it's an amazing process to watch companies transform. Sue and I get to do that very often, and to see that data and kind of the aha moments that we get from understanding where we can improve, even with a small change, and to see where that leads and how much a company can save, how much more resilient and sustainable they become internally. It's really phenomenal. And so it's our pleasure to be able to help companies do that. And I hope that more and more companies realize that it's not the big wild beast that it seems to be, that there really are some gem pieces here that are very profitable for them. Back over to you, Michael.
Couldn't agree more.
Thank you very much, Sue and Emily. Welcome back, Aedin. Glad to know that it's not a beast. So we've got 10 minutes to do this discussion now, but I think we've prepared the way quite well. Sue, can we just sort of summarize? So the business benefits of ESG. Sue, can you sort of summarize what they are?
Yeah, I think if you think about it, this is about how you conduct your core business. So it helps you. What's that? It helps you save money.
Ignore that. Sorry.
It helps you save money. It helps you win business. It helps you be more resilient. And underpinning it all, having a clear ESG strategy stops you chasing your tail. There it is.
Okay. And can you sort of drill down? Can you sort of list the key benefits?
Well, so I think on saving money, it's about, turning off stuff, so using less energy. But it might also be that, if you're better to your employees, if you pay them more and you give them better conditions, you have lower sickness rates, you have lower churn. So there's kind of just business savings in just doing these things well. Winning business, increasingly, customers are taking this into account in their buying decisions. So if you're a B2B business selling to other companies, you'll being asked a ton of information on your ESG stuff as part of your bid before they'll decide whether to trade with you or not. So it's not just about your product, it's about all this ESG stuff as well. And if you're selling to customers, you can actually enhance your brand, like a Tony's Chocolonely making chocolate slave free, that enhances their brand. I think I would like to say people are prepared to pay more for it. I think there is sometimes an intention action gap. They want to, but the cost of living is what it is. But I do think the direction of travel is clear there. And the resilient thing, I won't go on about that. I think we've talked about that a lot. But if you've got these things properly built into, if you can foresee where there are going to be floods in your supply chain so that you diversify a bit and you buy stuff from other places, I think it just inherently makes your business more robust.
Okay, thank you for that. And Aedin, have you got anything to add to this, to what Sue just said?
The screen froze.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, sorry, the screen froze there for a second, but it's fine, I think now. I 100% concur with those. I would just, just to give some examples, I suppose you're quite right. I've seen live examples of it affecting business and winning business. For example, there's an Irish PR firm here, for example, who's shoe into nearly every big contract that comes around. And recently they were kind of like, we need to actually articulate our ESG credentials now, because actually we're not even getting into, not even the long line of the mandate, whatever about the short list. So that's a complete sea change. So there's an example of an organisation that was a shoe in to win business now won't even get in the first round. And then because I work in the investment and financial services a lot, I've seen many cases of, where you might have an institutional investor who's been with a particular asset manager for years and years and years, very good working relationships, even decent investment returns, but have now amended their ethical and responsible investment policy. And sometimes the existing manager is still in a position to provide the service, and sometimes they haven't evolved enough in the ESG space to now offer. So they're losing business in that situation, and someone else is gaining it. So it's a lose business, gain business scenario. And I would just highlight again, I wouldn't underestimate if there's a HR director in the room, for example, attracting the best people. Increasingly, you have to have an organisation with good credentials in this space.
And how does risk mitigation play into all of this? Is that not a key business benefit of all of this, Aedin?
Yeah, I've heard it described that, ESG, there's a huge risk in getting it wrong, but a huge opportunity in getting it right. And I really think it is about that spectrum of, on the one hand, you're mitigating risk. Maybe your attitude as an organisation, look, we just want to do least damage to people, to the environment. And that's fine as an approach if that's all that's within your capacity. But if you really think into the long term, you want to be actually making positive impact too. So you have to decide as an organisation where you are on that spectrum from, do I just want to minimise the risk, or do I really want to be a force for good for business? And that is a unique decision for any organisation. And it is why increasingly you're seeing more commercial organisations now aspiring to become B corporations or benefit corporations.
Okay, anything to add to that, Emily?
With this independent validation that they are corporate citizens. So there's everything in between, and it's a different resilience approach for them.
Sorry, Aedin, I interrupted you there for a moment. Have you got anything to add to that, Emily?
No.
Well, I think, as we move around these topics from, how to win the business, how to be resilient, there's the element of how to bounce back. And I think that in today's world, we've seen it particularly because of the past couple of years. Every company, small or large, has to be very agile, very flexible, very lean. They have to know how to do more with less, because we don't know what's going to happen. Whether it's connected to social issues like health or environmental issues that are to come and are already happening. And so once you have the stable infrastructure of an ESG mentality or a sustainable mentality, as we said, it could take different names. But when you've built your company and transformed it to be a company that can stand on those frameworks, you will be resilient. You will be able to bounce back. You'll be able to be flexible and agile to whatever the world throws at you, whether it is people, planet, or profit. All of it will be addressed.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, now the next question really is, how does ESG help you win business? Sue, any observations on how ESG helps you win business?
Well, I think we're talking about that. So you know, the B2B business is asking you for your credentials, what it does for your brand. I mean, another one is to the extent you people are bidding for government work or local authority work. It's enshrined in UK law, for example, that those buyers have to allocate 10 or 20% of the bid evaluation to, it's called social value, but it's a proxy really for ESG type stuff. What extra are you adding to the social fabric of the community at the same time as delivering your core offering? So I think all of the sort of examples we're coming up with show that just having an amazing product or amazing offering isn't enough anymore, either because, you know, all things being equal, they'll pick someone with a higher ESG score, a better ESG kind of rating, or in some cases you're not even allowed, unless you meet a certain threshold, you're not even allowed to bid for that work. So I think it really is sort of, you know, it's becoming business as usual. I think that's the point.
Okay, and Aedin, ESG stops you chasing your tail.
Yeah, well, in theory at least. I mean, if you take the time to kind of set up your frameworks for, you know, analysing risks under E, S and G, and spending that time, especially, I suppose, as I said, I'm involved a lot in the financial services sector, and there'll be a lot of time spent, prescribed or otherwise, by regulators about, you know, scenario analysis and deciding what ESG risks are material or significant really in your organization. So if you can identify what your material risks and opportunities are, who your important stakeholders are and what the priorities are for them, well, then you can focus your efforts. You can decide where it is you want to be in terms of sustainability, what your focus areas or concentration areas need to be, because nobody can boil the whole ocean overnight. And then you can drill down your efforts within those pillars with individual KPIs and targets and a clear roadmap. That would be the goal. If that makes sense.
Okay, thank you very much. And Emily, this process is confusing. Now you talk about strategize, transform, and inform. Can you describe that to me?
Yeah, the process now, especially as we go towards one single framework, as Sue said, hopefully we're all hoping for one kind of consistent one. When that happens, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to simplify the whole process, but it will focus us onto one type of discussion piece. So all of the different consultants and advisors and service providers that can help companies reach performance excellence in sustainability will be able to focus around one set of operational guidelines, and then each industry will take that to what it means to them, which is really where we want to be going. That knowledge will then seep in almost naturally, just like it does in other elements of your business. And once we can customize it to a discussion around your company, in your industry, with your challenges, that's when we're really going to see some great movement and some good work towards that performance excellence that we're striving for.
Okay, thank you, Emily. We're very short on time. Aedin, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to talk about SMART. What's SMART?
Okay, right. So we've spoken a lot about, you know, you have to decide where it is you want to get to in terms of sustainability, set out your roadmap and targets and metrics and so on. If you want goals that are really deliverable on, they need to be what's called SMART goals. So specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely or time-bound. So an example of specific, for example, is like, don't just say, oh, well, you want to reduce our carbon footprint. By how much, how? Be very specific. Otherwise, how are you going to measure and track progress and then keep moving the dial? You know, relevant, like, do they align with our overall corporate purpose and values? You know, and attainable? Are they going to be really attainable with the resources we have? Do we need to get more resources in? And timely, like set deadlines, because you know yourself, nothing happens without deadlines.
Thank you for that. Aedin, maybe you could put Smart up on the social media after this and just clarify.
Will do.
That'd be right. And finally, so even less time, what does it all mean for business?
Oh God! In what? In 5 seconds?
Yeah,
I'm going to say, be in control. Don't let it happen to you, because we've said there are benefits. We said there are risks of not taking it seriously, and it isn't going away anytime soon. So be in control. Don't let it happen to you. Be on the front foot.
Thank you very much, Sue. That's it for today. Please join us next week at 1 p.m. BST when we're looking at the measurement of ESG. Thank you very much, Sue, Emily, and Aedin, and see you all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.